Joshua chapter 6, why don't we stand? Let's read, beginning at verse 22. But Joshua had said to the two men who had spied out the country, "Go into the harlot's house, and from there bring out the woman and all that she has, as you swore to her." And the young men who had been spies went in and brought out Rahab, her father, and her mother, her brothers, and all that she had. So they brought out all her relatives and left them outside the camp of Israel. But they burned the city and all that was in it with fire. Only the silver and gold and the vessels of bronze and iron they put into the treasury of the house of the Lord. And Joshua spared Rahab the harlot, her father's household, and all that she had. So she dwells in Israel to this day, because she hid the messengers from Joshua sent to spy out Jericho. The people of Israel have now been thoroughly readied to enter into a sustained conflict that will eventually settle them into the land that God promised would be theirs. It'd be theirs forever. God has been doing this slowly. He's been working on the foundation of his people's character. They've been learning to wait on the Lord, to trust in his ways, and to honor his place in their life at every turn. In the whole story, as you've read not only just these 6 chapters, but also their entire story, God has proven himself to be faithful and reliable to his word at every turn. As the river parted, and as the people who had been circumcised rested peacefully without incident, they knew they could trust this God that had brought them across the desert. Now it's time for them to move forward, to make war, and to take what God has deemed to be theirs. So let's take a look at verse 1 and 2. Now Jericho was securely shut up because of the children of Israel. None went out and none came in. And the Lord said to Joshua, "See, I have given Jericho into your hand, its king, and the mighty men of valor." Jericho, this mighty city, had become more like a prison than a military institution. Nobody was coming in. Nobody was going out. In ancient days, such a city would seek to wait out an imposing force, trusting in the strength of their walls and their provisions. The people of Jericho are expecting a sustained conflict that could have lasted in the siege of their city, could have lasted for years. Their actions are those of a defeated foe whose only hope is to outlast the determination of their invaders. That's their perspective. We must trust in our walls to keep these guys, the enemy, at bay. Joshua might have had a moment to doubt, but it was all wiped away when the Lord spoke to him, "See, I have given Jericho into your hand." It was theirs for the taking. God gives him a word and lets him know, this thing belongs to you. It's right here. Now, it hasn't happened yet, but in the mind of God, it's already done. God is letting him know, Joshua, you can have confidence that Jericho belongs to you. Now, Joshua had to take God at his word because what he saw was fairly imposing. Jericho was built on about 10 acres of land, which one commentator compared to a 7-city block radius. The walls, from the perspective of the Israelites, would have been very impressive. In essence, there were 2 walls separated by a sloped embankment. There were probably 15 to 20 feet between those walls. Archaeologists tell us that this little earthen part in between was mostly bedrock, so they dug through something that was very hard and difficult, which is incredible considering that they didn't have any of the modern implements that we enjoy today. It must have been a tremendous labor force. But the wall nearest to the people, where they would be walking, was about 23 feet tall. And then, that's the outer wall. The inner wall, after it goes up the embankment, would be another 20 to 30 feet, giving the look to be like a 65-foot wall, one wall together, even though there were 2 walls. These things were impressive. They were huge that they were looking at. But this city was theirs for the taking. It's funny how God can be. You want to say, "See, it's yours." You're looking at it like, okay, I'll just take you at your word. The king and the mighty men would not be able to withstand them. Notice that description. Keep that in your mind. The king and the mighty men. Most scholars are in agreement that Jericho was more of a military installation than it was a place where a civilian population was located. The word king here can be translated as a military leader, and the mighty men being the strongest brand of their military. But how is God going to accomplish this? What was the plan? Take a look at verse 3. You shall march around the city, all you men of war. You shall go around the city once. This you shall do 6 days. And 7 priests shall bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark. But the 7th day you shall march around the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow the trumpets. And it shall come to pass, when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when you hear the sound of the trumpet, that all the people shall shout with a great shout, and the wall of the city will fall down flat. And the people shall go up, every man straight before him. Now, one can almost imagine Joshua getting out a pencil and a big pad of paper, wanting to take down the instructions of what it was they were about to build, perhaps a new, not yet seen technology of God that would allow them to focus nuclear power against the powerful walls of Jericho. They were probably waiting there, so he's like licking his pencil. I don't know why people lick their pencils. I don't know why people do that. It's just a strange thing to me. But like when they, I don't know why that is. Or, when they lick it to turn the page. But he's ready to write down all these things. So I just imagine the conversation. God says, okay, Joshua, I'm about ready to give you the plan. I'm going to lay it out on you. Here we go. This is what it is. I want you to walk toward the city from here. Yes, Lord. Then march around it once. Yeah. At the end of your march, yeah. Have the priests blow their horns before the ark. And then go home. And Joshua's like, well, okay, then go home. Am I missing something here? Is there something that you failed to tell me? No, that's it. That's all you're going to do. 6 days you're going to do this. God's instruction to him, basically, get the people ready to walk. Get the people ready to walk. That's all. Now the ark that had just been standing in the center of the Jordan River, that ark was going to be on display. The presence of God is going to be moving along the walls. Joshua's going to tell them in the next section that they're just to walk around silently. Now that's the miracle, that God's people could shut up and walk, just keep walking without having to say anything. They were not to threaten the people. They were not to make a raucous noise. They were simply to walk each day around the city once while the priests blew their horns and then return to camp. That's the plan. No hysterics, no hype, no bizarre acts or antics. Just walk around the city. Being this was about a 10-acre walk, this was about an hour worth of walking each day. On the 7th day, there would be 7 hours of walking, following the direction of God. Simply going where the ark was going around the walls of Jericho. Oh, that's it, huh? You're just saying we just walk in obedience? We just follow your direction? We just go? This doesn't sound very reasonable. This doesn't sound like something I would do to tear down a wall. Yeah, but that's really all there is. You just keep walking. You keep following me, and I'll do what you can. God is showing them that. He's giving them an illustration. It's become an illustration for you and I. When we walk, when we would simply be obedient to all that he says to do and all that he says not to do, we'll see walls tumble too. But take a look here at verse 6. Then Joshua, the son of Nun, called the priests and said to them, take up the ark of the covenant and let 7 priests bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of the Lord. And he said to the people, proceed and march around the city, and let him who is armed advance before the ark of the Lord. So it was when Joshua had spoken to the people that the 7 priests bearing the 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the Lord advanced and blew the trumpets, and the Lord and the ark of the covenant of the Lord followed them. The armed men went before the priests who blew the trumpets, and the rear guard came after the ark, while the priests continued blowing the trumpets. Now Joshua had commanded the people, you shall not shout or make any noise with your voice, nor shall a word proceed out of your mouth until the day I say to you, shout. Then you shall shout. So he had the ark of the Lord circle the city, going around it once. Then they came into the camp and lodged in the camp, and Joshua rose early in the morning, and the priests took up the ark of the Lord, the 7 priests bearing 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of the Lord went on continually, blew the trumpets, and the armed men went before them. But the rear guard came after the ark of the Lord, while the priests continued blowing the trumpets. And the second day they marched around the city once and returned to camp. So they did 6 days. This is fascinating to me. I don't want to call your Christian life a ratio of this to that, but this is a very mundane moment, isn't it? Everyone can walk. There's not anybody among the mighty men that have to do anything special. Nobody has to stand out among anyone else. Everybody's just walking, just marching, simple. There's 6 days where they just do it once and nothing happens. All they do is follow God, and they just did the right thing. They just circled the 10-acre Jericho landscape, and they just came home. And it's just like that. Blew the horns, everybody walked home. Hey, what's for dinner tonight? Anybody have anything going? Anyone for Yahtzee? A lot of people will have you believe that Christianity is built on from one miracle to another. And then if you're not experiencing miracles and excitement, and you're not every day hyped up and looking for the adventure of walking with Christ, that you're not experiencing the real thing. You're not getting the real thing. You must not be very spiritual. Maybe you don't have enough faith. Maybe you don't have enough of whatever it is that everyone else has because you're not excited. You're not dreaming the dream. You're not living that extra whatever it is that someone thinks is Christianity. And while this is no ratio, I will tell you honestly that most of Christianity is this section right here. I just walked and came back. I just walked around, and I came home. In fact, it's funny this week. I want to let you know something. I had this prayer on Wednesday. This is where it got for me. Leela was working all week, so I had daddy duty in the mornings. And Anna and I, we enjoyed. I actually fooled her into eating my breakfast so that I didn't have to cook her another thing. But Leela has this thing where she makes this egg sandwich, and I cannot do that yolky egg thing. I just have not mastered that. Some of you are looking at me like, what an idiot. And I am. But I can make a killer egg burrito. And so I fooled her into doing this egg burrito. Are you seeing how mundane my life was, right? I make this egg burrito. We go and we watch Jelly Telly. We go, play around. She starts playing on her keyboard. I start to write a little bit. Still in my pajamas. I've got my coffee. That's the best part of the morning. The best part about waking up is Folgers in your cup. That's been true forever. So here we are. We're just man. And so at the end of the day, Leela gets home. How was your day? Yeah, well, Jelly Telly was great. That was fantastic. But boy, it was boring. In fact, I walked out. I'm doing the laundry. The laundry! This guy right here with the sermon is doing laundry. And I go out and I'm doing the laundry. I bring it in. Lord, just let anything out of the ordinary happen. I prayed that. The next day, a guy shows up at my door from Arizona. I hadn't seen him or whatever. He just shows up. I'm walking out to do the laundry. Hey! I had 5 days of unexpected that God answered my prayer. But here's the Christian life, friends. Just walk around, go home, sit down, and just be. For every one miracle, there's 6 days of mundane. For every one exciting adventure and great moment in history that you're going to experience, some miraculous, wonderful thing, there are 6 days of normal, almost incredibly boring, just average, just faithfully putting one foot in front of the other, obediently walking where God has you to walk. That's Christianity. That's what it's about. Now, for these people that are shut up in the city, what is going on in their minds? What's worse than something happening? I'll tell you what's worse. Nothing. When nothing is happening. Anticipation is almost always worse than the actual event. Consider the psychological effects of these people who are already in prison in their little world of walls and whatever else. They're already in prison in their fear. Consider the psychological aspect of seeing 600,000 armed men and the Ark of the Covenant that just split across the Jordan River. Imagine that right outside your window. And everyone's silent. That would be eerie after one day. And not knowing what's going on. When are they going to do something? When's God going to act? Here they are marching silently, and the Almighty God is calling upon them. Their terror was extreme. But imagine that what God is doing is giving them yet another chance to surrender. One more chance, one more day. But yet, while these days of surrender were a possibility, with every new dawn, with every new day, their chance to repent faded. These people are given their final chance, just as in the days of Noah. Noah had been commissioned to build an ark, and had done so while preaching to all who would listen for 100 years. That invitation to peace was a prelude to judgment. And even at that point, the Lord gives the people 7 additional days before the floods come upon the earth. God has given Jericho every chance possible to repent, short of violating their will and making them, which love never does. And God's people just walk. You know, when you walk and you're just doing what God calls you to do faithfully, obediently, that is a call to the city of Jericho that you work around, that they could come and have peace, the peace that you have with God. It's their call every day that they experience God in you, through you. They are being called to repent to the God that's real enough to have done something in your life. Every day is that day. God has given them one more day of grace to be around somebody who really does believe in this person that they call God and Jesus. Every day is one more day that they could come and submit themselves and surrender and say, I'm done living this life. I'm convinced that while these people were walking, here's another very fascinating part. Because remember, here's the ark in front of them. There's some soldiers out in front. There's soldiers behind. And I imagine what's happening as they walk around the city. When it becomes a habit in your life, you stop looking at the city. Because imagine the first time, imagine you're walking around, and you see the walls and you kind of want to touch, like when you go on tour somewhere and you're in the middle of a city and you want to touch that building and somehow putting your hands upon it is kind of important. So I imagine it, like, as they're walking by, they're letting their hand scrape across to feel what the mud brick felt like, and they're looking closely at it and whatever else, and maybe someone yells from the wall, you guys are whatever, and then their heads would just kind of veer up for a minute. But you know what I think happened as 6 days went by? I think their focus became laser attenuated to the presence of God, and as they walked, they became more impressed with God and His presence and what this was affecting in the lives of the Jerichites. They became more impressed with God than they were with the things around, the circumstances, the walls. This is why God has us walk this way, so that we can become more impressed with Him than with our circumstances and the difficulties that we face. The victory is in walking, and the victory is in the vision that we have of Him that grows as time goes on. Verse 15, but it came to pass on the 7th day that they rose early about the dawning of the day and marched around the city 7 times in the same manner. On that day only, they marched around the city 7 times. And the 7th time it happened, when the priests blew the trumpets, that Joshua said, shout, for the Lord has given you the city. Now the city shall be doomed by the Lord to destruction, it and all who are in it. Only Rahab the harlot shall live, she and all who are with her in the house, because she hid the messengers that we sent. And you, by all means, abstain from the accursed things, lest you become accursed when you take of the accursed things, and make the camp of Israel accursed, and trouble it. But all the silver and all gold and vessels of bronze and iron are consecrated to the Lord. They shall come into the treasury of the Lord. Notice those words and mark them in your mind. But it came to pass. There were chances to run out of the city and surrender to God. There were chances to run to Rahab's house. I don't care if there's no room in there. I'll be anywhere in that room to hide myself from the wrath of God. They had a chance to humble themselves over and over again, but every chance had been wasted and every day had been neglected. And there will come a day in every person's life. It's going to come to pass that God's justice will no longer be denied. The 7th day will come. That final time where there will be no more chance for that person. There has to be, and I pray that you're understanding this, there has to be a sense that the people around your life, whatever they may seem like, whatever walled institution they put up around them, that they understand, because you are living a life that's a rebuke to theirs, that they're doomed if they don't receive Christ. You have to understand this. Your family members, your friends, apart from Christ, are doomed. They must know Jesus. They must confess Christ. The seventh day began early. I don't know what the Bible means is early. I wonder if it's before coffee. I don't know, maybe 6. Some people don't even know that there's a 5 a.m. They only know there's a 5 p.m. I don't know if that's when it started, but they started this march, 7 laps. Joshua tells them, guys, what's going to happen? You don't take anything. None of this belongs to you. Jericho was going to be utterly destroyed, and nothing was to be taken out of it except for despite the temptation to do so. Everything in the city was considered accursed or devoted to destruction. This first victory was not about gaining wealth for themselves. This was the first fruits. This was the first riches of the land that were going to go and be dedicated wholly to the Lord. To take of it personally would make it a curse for them, and worse, it would afflict the camp of Israel. These items were to be brought into the treasury of the Lord. There wasn't to be any looting. God's saying there's some order here. We're going in, this is what we're going to take and nothing else. Now, verse 20, so the people shouted when the priests blew the trumpets, and it happened when the people heard the sound of the trumpet, and the people shouted with a great shout, that the wall fell down flat. Then the people went up into the city, every man straight before him, and they took the city, and they utterly destroyed all that was in the city, both man and woman, young and old, ox and sheep and donkey, with the edge of the sword. What a profound moment. When the people shouted in unison, the wall fell down flat. Now, it's been postulated that in this part of the world, that there's and there are faults under all of us. There's earthquake faults everywhere. Some people believe that there was an actual earthquake that hit at this very moment when they shouted, and that was the actual cause of the wall falling down. But the miraculous part was not the earthquaking, but the precise timing of the event. It happened as they blew the trumpet and the people shouted in unison. Now, I don't have a problem with God just going, no earthquake, nothing. He just puts out his finger and like the whole thing crumbles. I don't have a problem with that. If you believe Genesis 1:1, everything else is cake from there. Simple stuff. If God can create the heavens and the earth with just his voice, it's no problem if he just extends his pinky and knocks over our little Lego brick wall that we put up around ourselves. Oh God, you can't get me. I'm really fortified. Bing, and boom, it's over. Archaeologists tell us that the upper wall of the Jordan at this section was mostly composed of mud brick. And when the wall crumbled, that mud brick fell down the slope. That whole thing fell down the slope, and then it took out the outer wall. And what happened was, as it came down the slope, this huge amount of bricks, the weight of all that coming down, then it hit the bottom wall, it knocked that over. That created a rampart that everybody just ran up into the city. Pretty cool. God goes, hey, you guys need a bridge in. Let me just break this down. And boom, they were up. Now this week, just so you know, come later today, if you check out our Facebook page, there is an awesome archaeological video that I found on YouTube this week that I'm going to post on our Facebook that gives you a chance to take a look at this much more closely. Some of the actual archaeological evidence about this whole thing, which is fascinating. And I'd really encourage you guys, especially with kids, take some time. It's a 30-minute thing. Watch it with your kids. It'll build their faith. But there they are, and this imposing looking defense that they were just marching around, this one thing that they thought was going to hold them out and that these other people thought were going to keep them in, is now gone. It's just over. It's down on the floor. It's now become the bridge that we're walking in on. God's patience had lasted 500 years with this group of people, giving them chance and chance and chance. And finally, with one fell stroke, the city walls just fall flat. Now, I want you to notice, we've gone through all this thing. We've watched from the beginning to now, and this is really kind of anticlimactic, isn't it? I mean, there's all this buildup, but then the walls fell flat and we went up and we won. Well, that's no gory details. No epic tale of the victory. Listen, folks, here's the deal. This is why this doesn't matter. There's several things. One, first of all, God is always going to win. That was never in doubt to anybody. That was never in doubt to God for sure. And as people's faith grew, as the Israelites' faith grew, they knew it was going to win. Even the people on the inside knew. This was a done deal before it even happened. God is going to win. Now, no matter how long a person sits behind their defenses, no matter how stubborn they are, no matter how intellectual they think that they are, God will always be the victor. Always. Nobody has ever beaten God. Nobody. Nobody has. That person, either in life or in death, will ultimately glorify and honor God. It will happen willfully and joyfully now and continue on into heaven, or regrettably and obligingly in hell. God will be glorified. Every tongue on earth, under the earth, in heaven, or in hell will one day have to acknowledge Jesus is the Christ, the Messiah, the Lord of heaven and earth. God will not be denied his glory. But neither is God the type of conqueror that takes joy in the death of the wicked. God's not going to celebrate that these people decided not to surrender. That's not worthy of celebration. Now, some of you are going to ask the question, because look at these next points, because this leaves us with a little bit of a prickly point here. They utterly destroyed all that was in the city. The city was razed, thoroughly, completely brought down to the ground. And every person in the city left to defend Jericho, whether men or women, young or old, were destroyed along with the city. Now, hopefully that understanding helps your heart a little bit. But I want you to consider this, because a lot of people will look at God and they'll go, wait a minute, you're saying God had them kill people. And right there it says young and old, and that's a little uncomfortable. Some of us have a problem. We think, how can a God of love? And this happened just this morning. I was looking around, and I just happened to stumble upon a blog that some guy stood out and he was challenging another brother. He said, how can a God of love do this type of thing? And as usual, this brother, this pastor, he got caught up in the question, but it's the wrong question. The problem with us is that we have this concept that God can only be love. He must only be love. That's his only characteristic. What's wrong with that is that's not his only characteristic. God is also righteous. God is also holy. God is also the judge of all the earth. Now, for you and I, we are familiar with his love, and we're grateful for his love. And even the world at large, they are recipients right now of his love and goodness, aren't they? I mean, everybody gets a good steak. Everybody gets to eat a well-done, medium-rare steak. Everybody gets that. Everybody gets to go outside today and enjoy the sunshine and the warmth at whatever level it will be when we get out there. And even the cold, for those of us that enjoy that more. Everybody gets a good gift from God. Everybody gets to enjoy that, whether good, bad, or indifferent. So we get to enjoy the love of God. But listen, there comes a time when that period of grace runs out, because that period of grace, that dispensation, that beautiful thing that God is giving to people, is giving them an opportunity to say, God, I want to be yours. I want to surrender my life to you entirely. And his love will lead them along and draw them and tell them of his goodness. But over time, as their heart says no and no and no, it becomes harder and harder. Then God must be their judge. He wants to be their lover. He wants to show them how much he cares and how much he desires to change their life. But if they decide, his love dictates that he will not force somebody to love him. At that point, that person can only then expect to receive the judgment due their actions. And God must judge. Well, some will say, still, Frank, that's not loving. Why not just rehabilitate these people? Why not just make them slaves? After 500 years of idolatry, they'd become a wicked, occultic, and baby-killing society. These people. They had taken babies out of moms' wombs, sacrificed them to Molech. They were like a rabid dog in a yard. And the only thing to do about that, when your kids are in the yard, is to take out the dog. Frank, you just made them dogs. That's not fair. They're humans. At some level, they gave up their humanity to follow after an animalistic instinct, because they became what they worship. That's what they became. So God isn't just this benevolent, loving being. Yes, he wants to be that. He wants to relate to people like that. But when they refuse All that's left is his judgment. And what God did here was thoroughly just to use this people as his instrument to take out this influence in this society. Now, another part of this, not to lighten it, because this is heavy. God called his people. This, by the way, this is not a repeatable thing. We can't take this and apply this to our lives today. God's called me to kill you. That's not the way it works. This was a special time in God's plan. But here's another part for you to consider. We just talked about how this was more of a military installation than it was a civilian population. Most of these people here were military individuals, and whoever was there was military in nature. But this saying here is also one that's a euphemism like we would use when we watch a basketball game. We watch a basketball game and we say, man, we massacred that team. Now, was there a real massacre? Was there somebody who really died on that team? No, but we use that kind of language. What we're having here is not to be taken literally, but figuratively. It was a rout. Nobody could stand. There was nobody left to fight against the Israelis. It was a total victory. That's the concept. That's what's going on. God says it's over and it's done. I'm going to have the victory. It's going to be complete, God says. Now, verse 22. But Joshua had said to the two men who'd spied out the country, go into the harlot's house and from there bring out the woman and all that she has, as you swore to her. And the young men who had been spies went in and brought out Rahab, her father, her mother, her brothers, and all that she had. So they brought out all of her relatives and left them outside the camp of Israel. Rahab was at least able to convince 4 people to stay in her home during this campaign. This is always sobering and worthy of our reflection as we consider the work before us. As you think about the fact that this world right now, God's never going to flood the earth again. He's not going to use Christians to go out and kill. That's not his plan. That's not what's going to happen in this world. But there is coming a time, and we're moving toward it, where judgment is a reality. God is not going to be patient forever. Everybody right now that you know, if we're not into some kind of thing where God is bringing judgment upon the earth, they will die and face the judge, one way or the other. If you're an amillennialist and you don't believe that there's a tribulation coming, God bless you. That's your right to believe that. You're wrong, but it's your right to believe that, and fine. But here's the point. If we don't have a worldwide thing where there are Christians who are dying for their faith or whatever and whatnot, there will still be a day where a judge is going to stand up and judge the people of the earth. That's the way it's going to be. And listen, you and I, as we fight and we desire to bring people into that, not because we're right and we want them to think like us and be like us, but because there is life in Jesus Christ only, then you need to understand this. In all these judgment epics that we watch, there are more that choose to perish than there are those who choose to believe and thus survive. Now, you and I, we think, this is a no-brainer. Have you heard that commercial on the radio? This is the biggest no-brainer in the history of mankind. Anyone heard that on the radio? And something about a reverse mortgage thing or whatever. No, this is the biggest no-brainer in the history of mankind. Trust Jesus Christ, bypass judgment, go into life. I can't think of a better deal. But here's the reality. 4 people here. Maybe more, maybe a couple more, but 4 that we know about. Because there are brothers, okay? Rahab's brothers, at least 2, and his parents, or her parents rather. And then Rahab. So technically 5. 5 people. Noah in his story. Some of you guys have seen this last week. Noah's trailer has come out. Already some warning signs, because Hollywood, anything they put together something's not right. But there's some cool special effects. I'm certainly not going to get my theology from there. But in Noah's story, only 8 people escape. In Lot's story, 3, Lot and his daughters. Jesus, you hear these people say, we're going to win this county, we're going to win this city for Jesus. Well, Jesus himself only won 12. Most of those guys took off the night that he was going to be crucified. One of them was at the cross. The rest of them were hiding out. And they all came back together and they hid behind the door and they locked it. In these judgment epics, folks, there are only a few that choose life. Many just dig in. Many just say, I'm going to hold out. It's not going to be as bad. He'll understand my reluctance. But that's not the case. Thankfully, and this is what makes it worth it. This is what you and I need to focus on, because we can stop and say, oh man, the majority is not going to respond to God. Or we can say, there's a miracle that there's a Rahab and a group of people that will. There's a group of people that will, and I need to keep ministering and evangelizing and speaking, and maybe there'll be 5. What a glorious thing that would be. Notice that these guys were left outside of the camp. Nobody was allowed to come into God's camp unless they were circumcised, i.e. they made a clear confession that God was their God. They had been delivered by these people, but it was not now assumed that they were part of the community. That would have to be decided. But Rahab was saved. Verse 24, but they burned the city and all that was in it with fire. Only the silver and gold and the vessels of bronze and iron they put into the treasury of the house of the Lord. And Joshua spared Rahab the harlot, her father's household, and all she had. So she dwells in Israel to this day because she hid the messengers whom Joshua sent to spy out Jericho. When you look upon the archaeological layers, they call them strata, you're going to find evidence, especially when you watch this video, that in one of the strata, when you cut it, it's like looking at the inside of a layer cake. And you can see the different layers of civilizations that are built on top of civilizations. Archaeologists, when they dug through, they found a strata that was completely burned, just like this. And in fact, all the metal objects were removed. All the gold, the silver, the bronze, all that was gone. There wasn't anything to discover, but there were ceramic pots filled with wheat and barley. And they were toasted all the way through, that they found in perfect condition in the walls. I say all this because one of the things about the Bible, you have absolutely no reason not to be confident that what you're reading actually happened. There's plenty of archaeological evidence that support everything that the Bible says has happened. You can't say that about other books that claim to be God's truth. The Mormons, they still can't find the golden tablets. They can't find one city that they talk about in their book. It's not there. You know why? Because some guy made it up. That's Mormonism. You can't find it. Our Bible, not the same. You can find, in fact, they just found an ancient city, the city of Gezer. It's where all the old geezers live. Yeah. The ancient city of Gezer was under another city that they found. That's the way it is in Israel. There was a guy when we went who was trying to expand his house into the backyard. And when he started digging, a huge hole appeared. Oh, well, there's the city of Bet Shan underneath him. And so they started doing all this dig. They found all these huge, it was an entire city that we visited when we were there. Just some guy was just like, trying to dig out a pool or something. That's what it's like in Israel. Here's an ancient city. Underneath, there's another ancient city. Archaeology shows us over and over again that God's truth is real. This word you can take to the bank. It all happened just like it said. I love this. Rahab lived with the people of Israel up to that day. It's not said about her family. Did you notice that? They may have gone and lived elsewhere, but Rahab became integrated into the people of Israel, and she's going to be a significant contributor, so much so that from her very line comes the Messiah himself. Verse 26, then Joshua charged them at that time, saying, cursed be the man before the Lord who rises up and builds the city Jericho. He shall lay its foundation with his firstborn, and with his youngest he shall set up its gates. So the Lord was with Joshua, and his fame spread throughout all the country. Just a final note here before we stop and begin to take communion, but Joshua's curse here lets us know that this was a sacred place to God that was being burnt up as an offering to God. The person who did not observe this would be childless. They would have no future, is what he's saying. So you're thinking, who would do this? Who would build the city again? Well, in the days of Ahab, one of the worst kings in Israel's history, one of the most wicked kings, a man did attempt to build this land again. Is in 1 Kings chapter 16, verse 34, Hiel of Bethel lost his son Abiram with the foundation, and Segub, that's his name, with the gates, thus fulfilling Joshua's prophecy. God's saying, this place belongs to me. Whoever touches it, they're toast, just like this city. Now Joshua, in looking at his life, he becomes more famous now. Now this verse goes better with next week, so we'll hold that there. But as we consider this whole chapter, as we just fly back over it, how did they win? They walked by faith. They trusted in a plan. They just moved like God told him. They walked obediently. Their vision was focused upon him permanently, and he became more impressive to them than their problems. And that's the secret. That's how God wins the day there, and that's how he wins it today in your life. You're not called to do anything crazy, miraculous. Just walk with him. Just trust him. Just do what he says, and you'll see him win. No matter what you're facing, no matter how big the issue is, those walls will crumble when you're obedient to the Lord, because he wants to have victory in your life, and he will if you'll walk with him. Let's pray.